1984, the first attempt at bringing Frank Herbert's epic science fiction novel Dune to the big screen was met with box office and critical failure. Although the film accrued a cult fanbase over time, the book's reputation as being unfilmable endured. That is until the turn of the millennium, when Dune was brought to the small screen in the form of the Sci-Fi Channel Miniseries Frank Herbert's Dune. Though far from universally acclaimed, the miniseries was a ratings hit, ushering in an era of other successful miniseries for the cable channel, including a sequel. When executive producer Richard P. Rubinstein first bought the rights to adapt Dune, he optioned the entire book saga, from the original Dune novel to the final Frank Herbert story, Chapterhouse Dune. The first miniseries had been a big success for the Sci-Fi Channel, bringing in high ratings and an Emmy win for its visual effects. Knowing the rights to the full saga was already secure, the Sci-Fi Channel again approached writer-director John Harrison about a sequel miniseries. Harrison was extremely enthusiastic about the prospect, but being a fan of the books, he didn't believe there was enough material in Dune Messiah alone for a 3-part miniseries. Therefore, he decided to merge both Dune Messiah and the third book, Children of Dune, into a single adaptation. Many of the first miniseries cast members returned for Children of Dune, including Alec Newman as Paul Atreides, Julie Cox as Princess Irulan, Barbara Kodatova as Chani, Ian McNeice as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Zuzana Gislerova as Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, and P.H. Moriarty as Gurney Halleck. However, Saskia Reeves was unable to reprise her role as Lady Jessica due to pregnancy. Harrison's first choice for the role was originally Alice Krieger, but she had to turn the part down due to scheduling conflicts. When she was re-offered the part for Children of Dune, she accepted. Star Trek fans will know Krieger for her performance as the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact. Other replacements included Edward Atherton taking over the role of Duncan Idaho, and Steven Berkoff taking over the role of Stilgar. Carl Dobry, who originally played Liet Kynes in the first miniseries, was brought back in the new role of Korba. Like the previous miniseries, the production wanted a well-known movie star in the cast. For Children of Dune, Susan Sarandon was cast as Princess Wensekia. Sarandon was a huge fan of the Dune novels, and jumped at the chance to be involved in the project. Other new cast members included Greek-German actress Daniela Amavia as Alia, English actress Jessica Brooks as Ganima Atreides, and Scottish actor James McAvoy in one of his early breakout roles as Leto Atreides. Production once again took place at Prague's Barrandov Studios in the Czech Republic. While John Harrison had written and directed the first miniseries, Children of Dune was directed by Greg Yaitanes, a veteran of both TV and film who continues to work on big-budget shows like House of the Dragon to this day. Famed cinematographer Vittorio Storaro, who had shot the first miniseries, was unavailable for the sequel series, and so was replaced by Polish cinematographer Arthur Reinhardt. The approach to the visual effects of Children of Dune was quite different to the first. Previously, the production had used large painted backdrops for the various desert scenes. However, for Children of Dune, all set extensions and environments would be created digitally. For the score, composer Brian Tyler replaced Graham Revell. In contrast to Revell's mix of percussion, woodwinds, and electronica, Tyler created an epic orchestral score, once again performed by the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. A centerpiece of the score was the track Inama Nushif, the lyrics of which Tyler pieced together from Fremen phrases seen in the original books. After another demanding and lengthy production, Frank Herbert's Children of Dune premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel on the 16th of March 2003. It's slightly strange that pre-2021, the best adaptation of Dune was not even an adaptation of Dune itself, but its sequels. Children of Dune comfortably surpasses its predecessor series by quite some margin. The Dune universe is rendered with far more scope and believability than in the previous miniseries, mainly thanks to the new approach to directing, cinematography, and visual effects. The various sets depicting Arrakis and the other worlds, which felt limited and occasionally cheap-looking before, now feel like real places. Arrakeen especially feels authentically ancient and lived in. Arthur Reinhardt's choice of strong, directional lighting dominated by a single colour feels far more naturalistic, while also helping to distinguish the various locations from one another more clearly. Using a blue screen in place of in-camera backdrops also goes a long way in selling this world to the viewer. While the CGI certainly doesn't hold up and was far from convincing at the time, this change helps the series to better convey a sense of scope to the viewer. In Dune, once one noticed the same painted backdrops being reused over and over again, it shattered the illusion of this setting, turning this epic space opera into something closer resembling a high-end recording of a stage play. Though the digital environments in Children of Dune aren't photoreal, they ironically create a vaster canvas than the literal paintings used before. These locations have real depth and variety. Combined with the strong use of lighting and colour, Children of Dune has some truly striking images, at times resembling John Schoenherr's famous artwork. Greg Yaitanes also seems to have a much firmer grasp of handling the general scope of the story than John Harrison did. Whereas Dune often suffered from the heavy use of stock footage and poorly framed fight sequences, the action in Children of Dune is far more cohesive and engaging. The set pieces, battles, chases, and duels carry much more drama and character as well as clarity. This brings us to Children of Dune's biggest strength. It feels like an actual story being told, rather than an encyclopedia being recited. The elevated feel of the series is carried beautifully by Brian Tyler's spectacular score. As opposed to Graham Revell's work, which was mostly ambient music or fast percussion, Tyler uplifts the drama with sweeping, distinct melodic themes. It's no wonder the Summon the Worms track ended up in so many trailers. In my previous retrospective, I mentioned how, in attempting to adapt more material from the book, the Dune miniseries often felt as if it was over-clarifying its world-building and plot elements. Children of Dune focuses squarely on the characters and their relationships. Alec Newman gives a measured and tragic performance as Paul Atreides. While the series is sympathetic to him, it also doesn't shy away from showing us how much of a dictator he has become.
Alia knows my mind. I forbid a constitution. Order in council this day, etc., etc. Irulan, you taking this down?
Yes, my lord.
Even so, the viewer feels for his plight as a man cursed with foreknowledge, knowing everything he holds dear will be lost one day, something which he is both powerless to stop and unable to move beyond. Once again, Brian Tyler's score carries the standout sequence of the series with his piece Inam Nushif. It's a scene of contrasts. It shows us a wonderful birth, a tragic death, and the ruthless slaughter of Paul's enemies. The music perfectly embodies this mix of emotions, turning Leto and Ganima's birth into something wondrous, making Chani's looming death all the more heartbreaking, and turning cold-blooded murder into a moment of exaltation. Part 2 isn't quite as strong. It veers into some of the same problems as the previous miniseries in being too faithful to the books. As this is an adaptation of 2 books, Part 2 can't help but feel like the series is starting over again, losing the momentum built up in Part 1. There are also extraneous plot threads which don't amount to anything, such as House Carino kidnapping a sandworm. It's a cool scene, but the payoff to this thread doesn't happen until a later story, so it feels like an odd inclusion in this series given the amount of time it takes up. That being said, Part 2 is anchored by the charisma of James McAvoy's Leto and Jessica Brooks's Ganima. The charisma of both actors is only offset by the sense that the twins are somehow dangerous. It's their evident intelligence mixed with their youthful impertinence, the way they read people, almost finishing each other's sentences.
For a moment, you almost imagined that's who we were.
Didn't you? You almost let yourself believe that we were father and mother.
Part 3, however, is where the rest of the cast shines. Alice Krieger gives a more reserved performance than Saskia Reeves, but is just as well cast. Her steely demeanour is something which made her well suited to playing villains like the Borg Queen, but Krieger's Jessica is just as passionate and caring as the character was in the first miniseries. Susan Sarandon is clearly having a ball as the villainous Princess Wensikia. She hams it up nicely as she plots from the shadows, becoming almost giddy at the prospect of House Atreides' demise. The character is a borderline caricature, but it's Sarandon's commitment to the bit which makes the performance so compelling. Meanwhile, Daniela Amavia as Alia is at her best when she's at her most unhinged. Alia's transformation from an overburdened outcast to a brutal dictator also gives the returning Ian McNeice a chance to shine. While not as demented as Kenneth Macmillan's Baron or as intimidating as Stellan Skarsgård in the most recent film, McNeese's Baron excels in his insidiousness. Although he often berates and manipulates Aaliyah from the shadows, he takes a perverse delight in knowing he's the only voice Aaliyah can bear to listen to. Rather than taking great pains to ensure no one in the audience is left behind by the complexity of its plot or the strangeness of its world, Children of Dune knows that to succeed as sci-fi Shakespeare, the viewer has to care about the characters. If one hasn't read the books, they likely have no idea what the Golden Path is or what exactly being pre-born means, but the trade-off is having a more complete understanding of the emotional core of the story. The most impressive feat this miniseries pulls off is that, unlike the previous adaptations, Children of Dune manages to cut through the noise and finds the heart of Dune. Just like the first miniseries, Children of Dune was met with rating success and awards buzz, and this time the critical and audience reception was even more positive. Particular praise was given to the visual effects and performances of cast members like Susan Sarandon and James McAvoy. One would think, given the success of both miniseries, that the third would follow suit. However, a miniseries adapting further Dune novels never came to be. The reasons for this are nebulous and difficult to find solid information on. Considering these two miniseries encapsulate the first Dune trilogy, and writer John Harrison saw Children of Dune as the conclusion of the story of House Atreides, it's possible Harrison didn't intend to make any more beyond Children of Dune. Then again, the huge expense of both productions may also have been a factor. Despite the strong ratings for both miniseries, these were not in-house productions at the Sci-Fi Channel, and so the network heads may not have seen as large a return on investment as they had hoped. This is mostly speculation though, as again, information about a possible third Dune miniseries is virtually non-existent. For whatever reason, another Dune miniseries never got off the ground, and for the most part, the Sci-Fi Channel adaptations were quickly forgotten, as opposed to the 1984 movie, which maintained a strong cult following. Of course, Dune did return to the big screen in 2021, with the first part of Denis Villeneuve's epic two-part adaptation. Compared to the previous efforts, this version of Dune is easily the most successful, critically, commercially, and in terms of pop culture impact. For the longest time, Dune languished in relative obscurity when compared to works like The Lord of the Rings, which was also considered unfilmable for many decades. At the time of writing, Part 2 won't be released until next year, but if Part 1 is anything to go by, this is easily the best adaptation we've had so far. Though some book fans may take issue with the absence of certain elements, the filmmaker's choice to dispense with the peripheral material and focus on telling Paul's story is a wise one. Part of Dune's unfilmable reputation has had a lot to do with its seemingly impenetrable world. Yet one of the reasons previous adaptations failed was because they dumped so much nitty-gritty world-building onto the audience when it really wasn't necessary. The film uses exposition carefully and intelligently. Elements which are crucial to the plot are given the most amount of attention, whereas the larger world building, the Imperium's power structure, personal shield combat, mentats, etc., are conveyed visually, inviting the viewer into the world rather than telling them to sit there and listen. The result is a movie which not only looks great, but also encapsulates the themes and emotions of the story within Paul's journey. To make another Lord of the Rings comparison, the 1984 movie can be likened to Ralph Bakshi's animated effort, lovingly made, reverent of the source material, but ultimately too compromised and off-putting to be truly successful. Whereas the 2021 version is the equivalent to Peter Jackson's celebrated trilogy, capturing the heart of the story in vivid detail, while making intelligent changes here and there to ensure audiences get as much entertainment as they do philosophy. Speaking personally, I can't wait to see Part 2 next year. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to like, subscribe, and share to stay up to date on all of my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, jump over to my Patreon where you can see videos early, uncut, and ad-free. Speaking of which, I'd like to say thank you to all of my patrons and members now appearing on screen, with an ultra thanks to Tom, Dusk, Colin Camille, Patrick Fleming, Will Martin, Matthew Camille, Ed Mark Starr, Dylan Thomas, Lilac Yane, Howard Craig Akervik, and Caging G. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.